Hi everyone, welcome to Tales of Dread. This episode takes us to Mackinac Island in Michigan, deep into the woods, and then on a drive early in the morning. All three stories come from fans who said what they saw was horribly life-changing. So, if you're on board and love the channel but haven't yet subscribed, please spin 3 times and click to like and subscribe. Thanks. Let's start with the stories. June 27, 2017, Mackinac Island State Park in Michigan. I used to be a workaholic who didn't have much, if any, time to myself. I worked in the tech department of a big company in Ann Arbor. I spent hours every day sorting through code, testing beta versions, and doing other hard tasks, and it was all starting to get to me. I had finally reached the point of no return. One day, I suddenly passed out at work and had to be taken to the hospital. This, of course, led to me getting some time off. So I thought that maybe spending time outside would be a good way to make up for some of the bad effects of working long hours. So, a few days into my break, I called my brother and we made plans to spend some time exploring Mackinac Island State Park. My brother likes to be outside. He was always ready to go on adventures and enjoy anything that had to do with being outside. On one of these trips, some friends took him to Mackinac Island, and ever since then, I couldn't stop hearing about how great it was there. So, that's how we came to decide that was where we wanted to go. He was so happy when I finally agreed to go with him. We made plans for him to pick me up the next day, which was a Friday, and head north. We planned to spend the whole week exploring the island and seeing everything it had to offer. The next day, he drove to my house and was there around 2 o'clock to pick me up for the 250-mile trip north from Ann Arbor to the island. Since cars aren't allowed on the island, we thought we wouldn't be able to get there until later in the evening. We would have to leave our car at the ferry company in Mackinac City. So, we stopped along the way to get some much-needed food, and we finally got to the island later that same day. We almost missed the last ferry, but thank God we made it just in time. We were tired from our long trip, but I was still excited to see what the island had to offer the next morning when we woke up. Right away, we got up. My brother suggested that we go to an area of unexplored wilderness to get away from all the noise. He said that even though camping wasn't allowed, he knew a place where people could sneakily have a real outdoor experience. He told me that one of his guides had shown him the place on one of his previous days. So, we finally got to a wooded area by the water that looked like it went on for longer than I could see. There were also some really big rock formations that kept us from getting lost in all the greenery. So, we've been on the island for about a day. At that point, my brother led us to the spot where we started a campfire among the trees. We weren't sure if it was legal or not, but we could see the remains of a previous campfire that looked like it had been made and left just a few days before. So, my brother made the campfire on his own. He had also brought the ingredients for making s'mores, which made me happy. Everything was going well, and I started to feel like my spirit and body were getting stronger. Well, this was the case until about 9 p.m., when the sound of the wind in the background changed into what sounded like someone moving around in the bushes. At first, we thought it might be someone from the island who had just wandered into the forest near us, but when my brother called out in the direction of the noise, no one answered. We thought it was an animal, but it was clear right away that whatever was hiding in the bushes was huge. By the way the trees were swaying, the ground was rumbling, and branches were breaking as people walked over them. The noise kept getting louder and closer to our campsite, even though my brother tried to scare it away by calling out. Soon, we were shocked when we could make out some details in the dark silhouette. What my brother and I saw coming toward us scared us so much that we couldn't do anything but stand there and stare. What we saw was a huge creature staring right at us. It was about as tall as a small pine tree. Behind it was something that stood on two legs and looked at us the whole time. It might have been 7 or 7.5 feet tall. Its body, especially its torso, looked like a man's, but it was covered in fur, and its face looked like a wolf's. It has a short snout in its mouth. It glared at us with a horrifying snarl, and we could see drool shining and dripping from its fangs. As we looked at it in complete terror, it stopped just short of coming out of the dark and into the light of the fire. It was almost like we were in a standoff because we were both staring at it. Then, my brother got up the courage to reach for a good-sized stick. We used to cook Seymour's, and as soon as he did, the creature noticed. It must have seen that as a small act of aggression, because it quickly ran back to where it had come from, despite looking scary. I'm starting to think that it was probably just us being curious, since nothing happened. When it left, we didn't even have to talk about it. We just put out the fire, left the campsite, and went in the opposite direction of where it had gone to this day. My brother and I talk about it every once in a while. We keep reminding each other that we both saw it, and that what we saw was really there. At this point, I think having him around is the only thing keeping me sane. Lilith, thank you. When I say that I've seen Bigfoot, most people don't believe me. When I tell them how scared I was by what happened, they don't believe me anymore. People seem to think that if there is a big, kind of great ape living in the forests of North America, it must be apes. It will be kind, shy, and even a little bit tame for some reason. I have never understood why people think that seeing Bigfoot or Sasquatch would be fun, like seeing a deer or moose while kayaking in Alaska, but in a more exotic way. This idea comes from Saturday morning cartoons and the TV show Harry and the Hendersons. When I asked them how they could possibly think this and if they would have thought the same if they had seen a mountain lion or a bear, they just laughed. Orangutans are really gentle giants, and gorillas aren't scary at all, despite what you might see on King Kong and in old horror movies. When I tell them that chimpanzees have been known to attack people violently, ripping flesh and even ripping limbs right out of their sockets, they look at me with a strange look of disbelief and say that chimpanzees are vegetarians, which is not true, even though they eat mostly fruit. They're omnivores like man. In order to get protein, they not only eat meat, but they also hunt smaller monkeys, birds, and small mammals. There are many examples of chimpanzees working together to catch small monkeys, tearing them apart, and sharing the meat in a way that shows the hierarchy within the troop. When I say that chimpanzees have been known to hunt down members of other chimpanzee troops and beat them to death, I mean that they do this on purpose so they can drag the bodies back to the rest of the group and eat them, especially the meat from the face and hands. People think I made it up. When I show them the proof, they're shocked, which in turn shocks me, because these aren't my closest relatives and they're telling me what I saw is wrong. Now, though, a meeting with a creature that is 8 feet tall, weighs well over a ton, and has teeth that are 5 to 8 inches long sounds more scary. In the first place, I don't understand. I've seen apes and baboons enough to know what they look like when they're angry. So, when I was comforted by a person who looked like what most people call Bigfoot, I felt my blood turn cold. I had just finished my daily walk through the forest and was heading back to town. I walked past the tree line and into the scrubland where sheep and goats are kept by local farmers. When I heard a horrible scream coming from one of the fields, followed by a horrible wet crack, I knew something bad was going on. When I turned around, I saw a ram lying on its back with a broken neck and back. The ram's legs were twitching and kicking horribly because of nerve reflexes, but it was clear that the animal was already dead. It had big horns to protect itself and the rest of the flock, but they didn't work this time. Instead, They were twisted up in the hands of a huge ape-like creature that had grabbed the space between the horns at the top of the head and started to pull. The hunched thing was already over 7 feet tall and probably closer to 8 feet when it stood up straight. This thing, which had clearly killed the ram with its bare hands, was dragging the dead body of the sheep behind it, leaving a long trail of blood across the grass. It looked like a cross between a gorilla and an orangutan and was much bigger than the average chimpanzee. The thing turned its head toward me and opened its mouth, revealing huge, yellowed teeth that I knew would tear that sheep in half in no time. I didn't want to give the creature another chance to eat, so I ran as fast as I could back to town. People are wrong not to be afraid of what lives in those forests, and they are also wrong if they think it's a vegetarian. I'll never forget the time I was going to the gym early in the morning and saw something on the side of the road. That to this very day makes no sense. So I was driving slowly and thinking about my workout when I saw something on the side of the road. My first thought was that it was either a deer or a wolf. No. As I got closer, it looked like a mix between a dog and a person. I thought it was a dog at first, because what else could it be? A bear doesn't walk or move like that. I also saw that it looked like it was bending down to pick something up off the ground. I didn't want to think too much about it. But as I got closer, I could see that this dog was strange in a strange way. I did my best to figure out what it was as I dragged toward it. I'm proud of myself for keeping the car on the road, to be honest. I don't know how I didn't end up in a tree. Not only was this dog huge, but it also looked wrong. Even stranger than its size was the fact that it looked like it was sitting. So I kept going until I was almost there. It didn't even register how big of a monster it was, and the way it was eating was even stranger. My mom has dogs, and as you might expect, they eat from a bowl on the floor while standing on their front legs and bending their heads into the bowl. That makes sense, right? This thing was sitting up and, just like a person, putting food in its mouth with its hands. And that's when I also realized that this dog was about the size and shape of a person, with long, hairy arms and legs and a head like a wolf's. I think there might be a little bit more German Shepherd or Alaskan Malamute in there somewhere. A dog the size of a person was eating lunch or whatever it was eating better than some people. So I drove really slowly, and just looked around. I couldn't help but look. I was dumbfounded and tried to figure out what I was seeing, but I couldn't figure it out. I looked around to see if someone was hiding in the trees with a camera because I thought this was some kind of weird, complicated joke or maybe a scene from a movie or TV show. I thought I might see a lot of trailers and a film crew. Any of these ideas seemed much better than what was happening in front of me. There was a dog on the side of the road that was as big as a person. I watched it for a while as I drove down the road and looked in my rearview mirror. It never moved from that spot and just sat there eating. I didn't go straight to work after the gym like I had planned. Instead, I went home. Just one more look to make sure I wasn't going crazy. As I drove by, there was nothing there. There was no sign of a dog, person, or person. So I immediately slowed down and wound down my window to look for signs that I wasn't crazy and that this hadn't been some kind of waking hallucination. I didn't see anything at first, but then I saw something a half-eaten fawn tore in half. That was way more than I needed. I stepped on the gas pedal and sped off. I've been by that place a few times since then, but I haven't seen this animal there again. But I do slow down and look because sometimes I see roadkill that looks like it has been torn apart and eaten. It really still gives me the creeps.